Let me explain something to you. Josephus tells us, in fact, it's up here if you want to read it afterwards. Josephus tells us that in 65 AD, over 256,500 lambs were slain. It was an automatic process. What you did on April the 10th is you picked out your lamb. Had to be spotless, had to be without blemish for your family. Everyone did that. But something else happened. The high priest went and he picked out his lamb that was going to be the lamb for the whole nation. In fact, when Jesus does his triumphal entry, he upstaged the high priest, because what normally happened is on the Nisan the 10th, when they would take the high priest would take his lamb, he would come into the city and everyone would come out and they would have these palm branches and they're waving them. But something upstages the high priest. As he's coming into the city, Jesus rides in on a colt. And all the people start waving to him. And boy, it infuriates not only the high priest, but all the Pharisees. And they said, do you hear what they're saying? Shut them up. Jesus, of course, is the final Passover. So he's the Passover lamb. He says, if I shut them up, said even the rocks would cry out. But anyways, so he comes in. And for 4 days, he goes to the temple, because every day on the 10th, after you picked out your lamb, you had to inspect them every day to make sure there was no blemish. On the 14th of Nisan, you're going to kill it. Now, as I said, Josephus said over 256,000 lambs were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Passover, and they had to be brought to the temple. And people look at that and go, how in the world did they do that? Well, people, let me just tell you, it was like an assembly line. All these priests were there, and you brought your lamb in, and they slit its throat. They caught the blood. They passed it on. You took the lamb out. The next lamb's brought. They cut the throat. They take the blood. They pass it on. They get an empty one. They're doing this, and they've got these lines, and the one at the very end is taking that blood, and he's throwing it upon the altar. Starts at 9 o'clock, but by 3 o'clock, you got to be finished. Because the high priest has other duties. He's got to go mark the sheaves that's going to be used in preparation for the Feast of First Fruits that always happens on the first day of the week. So at 3 o'clock, it's over. And at 3 o'clock, the high priest is now going to sacrifice his Passover lamb. So he walks up to the altar. It's in a different place. And everyone sees that's still there. And he lays his hands on there. He's laying it on, confessing the sins of the nation. They take this Passover lamb and they cut it and they catch the blood. And as they catch the blood, they pass it, or the high priest takes it, throws it on the altar, and then he takes a step back. And he puts up his arms and he says, "It is finished." And what he means by that is, that's the last Passover lamb to be slain. Yeah. No other lamb can be slain now. This is the last one. At the very time, the Bible says at 3 o'clock, the very time that the high priest is doing that, Jesus in John 19 tells us, verse 30, is on the cross. And he raises up one last time and he says, "It is finished." And he dies. Signifying that I am the final Passover lamb. Also signifying that the old covenant is coming to an end. The new covenant will be initiated on my resurrection. But when he said, "It is finished," he didn't mean that his soul didn't have to go to hell. He meant, I'm the final Passover lamb, slain for the nation, but more importantly for the world. There never has to be another one.